Okay, everybody, hi. Today we're going to integrate content categories, or analysis of content categories, and our analysis of syntax. And as I've tried to show you in class, or demonstrate in class, the only thing our mind and our ears have to work on in either producing or comprehending language is phonology, and then syntax, morphology, syntax. That's what hits your ear. Although the only thing we're aware of as listeners and speakers, the only thing the child is aware of as a listener or a speaker, is ideas, or at least that's the way it should be. Of course, if you find yourself in a country in which you don't speak the language, then all you hear, as I tried to demonstrate in class, all you're aware of is sound. If English or the language you're listening to is your L2, you may be getting some ideas out of the language, but you're going to be spending way too much time paying attention to the sound and the words, i.e. the language form, and the sentences, trying to figure out the syntax, and you're going to be missing ideas. Language involves either producing or processing language form in order to get at the ideas. Well, since that's the way the mind works linguistically, in this course, Language Acquisition in Children, and in your profession as a speech-language pathologist, you're going to be evaluating children's language or adult language, and you are going to be helping children or adults acquire or rehabilitate language. And therefore, now we will see that to evaluate semantics, which is the driving force in language, language exists, as we've said, either from Bloom's point of view to express intentionality and content of mind, or from Chomsky's point of view to do that to oneself, use language as a tool of thought. And although it's also used, of course, from everybody's point of view to express what's in one's mind to somebody else. So semantics or ideation propels language or motivates language. It's the function of language, the ultimate function of language, but it operates on the code. So we're going to have to integrate and pay attention to, in this course, syntax. In the course on phonology, you pay a lot of attention to the phonology system and the way it's expressed, either through articulatory phonetics or acoustic phonetics. In this course on language acquisition, it's syntax we really pay most attention to, and semantics. So that's what we'll be doing today. However, before I start, I wanted to briefly review the focus of the last two sessions that we've had together, and the focus that will continue as we integrate content and form. And last week we discussed, I presented to you the Leahy content categories that correspond. You'll find them again. You'll find those content categories, by the way, in the Leahy taxonomy, and I believe it's chapter 10, which is posted on Blackboard for you. I believe it's chapter 10. And we will certainly be working with those content categories as we analyze child language in class, in our face-to-face meetings, in our synchronous sessions. But just to review with you again, the focus again of the Leahy model of our analysis of semantics relates to another point that we made in the past few sessions, certainly I made, that there is a relational component to language, and it's the relational component that is generative, that is the focus of assessment, and is the focus of treatment in the long and short term. So thus sentences represent universal logical relationships imposed upon empirical discoveries. That is, imposed upon the knowledge that we get from our experiences in the world, imposed upon that knowledge, imposed upon our efforts to acquire that knowledge, are relationships that our minds make, our minds. And it's those relationships that are described that underlie ideation. So last week we discussed how those universal logical relationships are imposed through play, through action, typically through children's play, and mentally. And mental imposition of those relationships is seen in the relational content that's represented via subject-verb complement relationships or verb-verb relationships. And that's what's going to ultimately be our focus today, those SVC relationships and VV relationships. But just remember, I'm going to skip over that, but just we reviewed categories of relational meaning last week, and they were, just to quickly review, they were in single verb sentences that have a subject, a verb, and may have a complement. The Leahy model identifies the following content categories. Existence, in sentences such as "this is a cat," where there's a relationship between a specific object, this, and the category it belongs to. A cat, cat, subordinate category or superordinate category. This is a cat. Disappearance, recurrence, two other similar types of reflexive object relationships. All gone cat, more cat. Disappearance, recurrence. Then there are the between object relation content categories. Again, code relationships between objects. And those examples are, well, first of all, the specific categories and the example: action. The girl kissed the boy, a relationship between girl and boy through kissing. An actor, a recipient of an action through kissing. Through an action, in other words. Right here, as I speak to you, Moses drinks his Diet Coke. Well, that's a relationship between Moses, the Coke, through drinking. Action relationship. Locative action relationship between actor or object and a change of location, such as the girl crawled into the tunnel. Between the girl and the tunnel, through crawling. Locative action. By the way, I put the Coke on the table. Locative action. I, between me, the Coke, and the table, through a change in location. Put is a locative action verb. Locative state. The Coke is on the table, everybody. Not moving. Action location develops before state location with children. Then there are part-whole relationships that we refer to within single objects that are described and the content as content categories. And these include attribution, part-whole relationships. The hat is brown, a relationship between the hat and its color. The hat is large, relationship in its size, hat and its size, excuse me. State relationships, part-whole relationships between a specified object and an internal state. The girl is sad, girl, state of being sad. And there are more relational meaning within sentences. Temporal, time relationships, as I said, it's 3 o'clock, or tense, I ran, past tense, that's a temporal content category. It's both action, by the way, I ran, relationship between me and just the action of running. But the past tense, it's ran, is both action and time. The second, the morpheme in it. Possession. coded by the verb have, I have a cat, I have a Coke, or by a pronoun, that is mine. Dative, the Coke is for mommy, the recipient of an action. Quantity, I have 3. I bought 2 Cokes this morning, quite frankly. That's the action of buying plus the number, 2 Cokes. Or there are 2, that's quantity as well. There's something that I'm not getting at right now, but I will get at very shortly, and that is the difference between how do you handle a sentence like I have 2 Cokes that have 2 content categories in them, don't they? I have 2 Cokes. Have and 2, because have, content category, possession. 2, TWO, content category, quantity. How do we handle that in our analyzing of sentences? We'll see. Negation, which can be, I think there are 2 that I pointed to. Rejection, I don't want the Coke. No Coke. Or denial. That's a Pepsi. I say, no, that's a Coke. Denial, denying the truth of a statement. Rejection, expressing not wanting or getting rid of. There are other forms of negation too. We also reviewed last week event relationships, or we looked at them. It was not yet review, was it? This is review. And those are relationships in sentences that have 2 verbs, and typically have sentences within single sentences, 2 sentences, such as additive, it's raining outside and I'm hungry, where there are 2 events, raining and hungry, being hungry, not related. Temporal, where there are 2 events that are related in time. Mom went to the store and bought a pizza. They're related in having to be a sequence, a time sequence. It's raining outside and I'm hungry. They're both potentially happening at the same time, but no conceptual relationship between the 2. But going to the store and buying a pizza, there is a time sequence relationship there. Causal, Mom bought the pizza because I was hungry. Now there's a relationship between buying and being hungry by virtue of causality in the 2 verb sentences. Sentence 2 events. And adversative, where there's a comparison relationship and there's a contrast in that comparison. I acted hungry, but I really wasn't. And I still haven't fixed the spelling on that. In a different type of syntax, complementation syntax, where there's a full sentence as the complement of a verb, and we will look more carefully at syntax, by the way, as in class, in our synchronous sessions, plus there will be posted along with this particular day's lecture, specific supplementary lectures that deal with syntax. A complementation mood, that is a sentence in which there is an infinitive complement to the verb. I want to go to the store. Want is a modal verb, and to go is the infinitival or infinitive form of the of an action verb there, and it's the complement of want. What do I want? To go to the store. Epistemic, where there's a cognitive relationship within the sentence, such as I know, and there's a second sentence, you are mad at me. That sentence, you are mad at me, fills in what you know. I understand that you're happy. I pretend that you're going to the circus. I pretended that I was a clown, etc. Those are all epistemic sentences where there's a verb, pretend, know, understand, that suggests a cognitive activity followed by a complement that's a full sentence. This doesn't work with any verb. This kind of syntax only works with the kinds of verbs that get at these kinds of relationships. Communication relationships involve communication verbs followed by full sentences within a single sentence. I said, and then I could follow that with a sentence. I was mad with you. I'm sorry, I can go. I was made with you. Misspelled, didn't correct that either. I said I told her that I was angry at her. Why am I so angry? I'm not sure. I commented that we have to make an adjustment in our schedule the week of October 23rd. I'll get to that later, etc. Notice perception. You saw that I wasn't talking. Now you noticed that I wasn't talking. You perceived that I wasn't talking. You heard. Notice perception codes a sense of some sort, or noticing something somehow through a sensation or perception, followed of course by a sentence that fills in what you perceived, saw, heard. Following me? And one other type of content category we reviewed last week was object specification, where there is a complement of a verb, of a noun, and not a verb. The boy who was hungry ate the pizza that his mom bought. Who was hungry is a sentence that tells us about the boy, and it is the complement of a noun phrase subject, isn't it? The predicate of that sentence is ate the pizza. Now, in that predicate, I put in that sentence, I put a complement of the noun of the head noun pizza. So that's object specification too. His mom bought. See, that's the that and the who. Well, the that and the who really are complementizing pronouns. They complement. They make a complement. They allow the sentence complement to be attached to either a noun or a verb. They're connectors. That, and the that doesn't even have to be there. I don't think. I think it would work without it. Let's see. The boy who was hungry ate the pizza his mom bought. You can say it with or without the that, right? In any event, the syntax is relative clause syntax. The content category is object specification. And again, please pay attention to what we're doing here. We are not, in our analysis of semantics right now, here, in the Leahy format, the Bloom and Leahy format, we don't we don't focus on the specific meanings of specific words, like boy, a young man, or young male, hungry, a feeling state, pizza, a round thing with the pepperoni and stuff on it. I like it with pepperoni and even anchovies. I like that. Well, we don't pay attention to that. What are we analyzing? The underlying relationship making of the mind, the quality of that, the meaning imposed or that permits these sentences. For example, object specification, the mind's making a relationship between the noun phrase, head of the noun phrase, and its complement. The mind makes the relationship between boy and hungry. It's that relationship we describe as object specification. Or the relationship between a verb of cognition and the thing that's understood or known. Well, that's an epistemic relationship, and it's that relationship that's described, a modal relationship or mood, a communication relationship, an action relationship, a locative action relationship, a dative relationship, if you're following me. That's where our focus is, on the relationship-making property of the mind. Okay, that's what we spoke about last week. Now I'm going to stop this slide. I'm going to pause for a moment here and then come back and review the syntax lecture that we did. And let's continue on. And one more, I'm going to review the lecture we did, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, and some of the work we did in class on syntax. And I just wanted to remind you what we said a sentence was. A sentence. We said it was ultimately an IP, an inflectional phrase that contains a tense, a noun phrase subject, a verb phrase predicate, and each phrase contains a head and may contain a second phrase that's merged, and that would be a complement. So I remember that I created this chart to represent an English sentence. I'll put a little more light on my face if I can. And then we have tense, a noun phrase subject, a verb phrase predicate, a head and a complement in each. And by the way, any phrase, an adjective phrase, a prepositional phrase, any kind of a phrase can have a head or a complement because heads and complements merge together into these phrasal units. In any event, and remember we illustrated that syntactic structure with, in fact, I said any sentence in the English language, really in the world, fits into a format like it would fit into this organization. Any sentence in the world. The order may be different from language to language, but these pieces are, which I've analogized to Lego blocks, the kind of Lego pieces in our head. I should have the Lego blocks here with me while I speak. In any event, they are, again, the relationship making components of language as mind function that we are, remember Chomsky made us aware of, and that we're trying to understand, because it is this relationship making property of the mind that develops in children, along with their acquisition of specific knowledge about the world and words to represent that knowledge. And also the information about how their particular language handles these components, these relational components, in their specific languages, expression and comprehension modalities. In any event, so notice that in a sentence, the boy ate the cookie. We recognize that the word boy is the head, boy, because that's the noun and the main noun. Ate is eat, the main verb, and its complement is in the additional noun phrase that merges with ate, and that's cookie. Ate, of course, picks up the tense through an adjunction kind of process. That is, tense gloms onto the verb as it does in many languages. So eat becomes ate in that sentence. And we recognize, of course, that that's the influence of the tense piece. Now, I gave you a more complex sentence. We looked at a more complex sentence. The boy who was hungry did something or other. And the boy who was hungry, I asked everybody last week, I ask you, what is the full noun phrase subject of the sentence, the boy who was hungry ate the cookie? I believe that's the sentence, but the second part is hidden here. because my colleague Helene Marshall fixed the clicks for me, and that this click fixing really challenges my memory, of which there's none left. Minimal memory functioning here. Well, in any event, I'm off on a tangent. Let's get back to the matter at hand, which is recognizing that boy remains the head of the noun phrase subject. It's boy still. But in this case, the subject, the noun phrase, has a complement. The complement is who was hungry. It merged with boy, and it's a relative clause, isn't it? Oh, it was not ate the cookie, it's had eaten the cookie, past perfect tense, where had now is the auxiliary, along with the en, uneaten. Again, notice eat remains the head verb in both the boy ate the cookie and the boy had eaten the cookie, but its form changes because tense either is separated from it and is expressed by an auxiliary, or is attached to it, as in the en part of Eden, or the tense irregularity that got coded in 8. We saw another, using the same chart format. I gave you a sentence last week. We looked at it. I know. I, the head noun. It's a pronoun. Operates a little differently than a noun, but it takes the same exact. It takes the same case actually. It plays the same function in a sentence as a noun. In this case, it's a subject. I is a subject. Head subject. Know that the boy ate the cookie. Now on that one, know is the head verb. The full predicate is know that the boy ate the cookie. And know that the boy ate the cookie, hopefully you recognize that as expressing epistemic content, in which know is the head verb and the boy ate the cookie is the complement of know. And it's a full sentence. It is. Remember last week I was asking you, what kind of a thing is the boy ate the cookie? What kind of a syntax thing is that? What kind of a grammar thing is it? What category of grammar is that? And that is a full sentence complement, isn't it? It's a full sentence. In other words, a full sentence. And that is as far as I'm going to go right now in this review. And now we're going to go to this week's challenge, which will be, I want to talk about one more way, the way that grammar and or syntax and semantics interact. We're going to bring them together here. And I'm going to talk about case first, and then distinguish between verb relation content categories and non-verb relation content categories that we have to identify when we do a Bloom and Leahy content form analysis, okay? So that's our next step in the process here. Okay, and now for the distinction between verb relation and non-verb relation content categories, the next way, or another way, that syntax and semantics interact in our and we have to pay attention to that interaction in our analysis of content form interaction using the Bloom and Leahy framework or taxonomy procedure, etc. Bloom and Leahy. Because what Bloom and Leahy are trying to do in their taxonomy and in their approach to language is help us understand and evaluate, really, how children put sentences together to express the ideas in their mind, which are really to express the relationships they're making in their mind, the meaningful relationships underlying their intentionality. So, with reference to that, and let me stretch this out a little bit more. I'm supposed to do that while I'm talking, but what the heck. This is my point. You are going to be analyzing. You're going to have challenges. You're going to have sentences which contain more than one content category, more than one semantic relation. And you have to analyze those sentences by virtue of, by considering how exactly, what drives the child's expression of these sentences and what drives the construction of the sentence itself in the mind, the relationship making in the mind. What drives it? And Leahy's approach is this, that this there is a distinction between verb relation content categories or semantic relations and non-verb relation semantic relations. Verb relation and non-verb relation. Verb relation content categories are primary. They drive sentence production and sentence comprehension. I use the term compute on the head. Compute on the mind computes meaning with reference to the heads of phrases. Heads of phrases play words, lexical items that have head functions have very important meaning functions in a sentence. So a verb relation content category is a content category coded by the relationship between the head of the noun phrase subject, head of the verb phrase predicate, and head of the complement of the verb phrase predicate. So it's the head of the noun phrase subject, head of the verb phrase predicate, and the complement component of the verb phrase predicate head. Those heads get special prominence in our analysis of semantic relations or content categories in sentences. Non-verb relation content categories is the semantic relation coded by any word in the sentence that is not a head of the noun phrase subject, head of the verb phrase predicate, or head of the complement of the verb phrase predicate. Any word that's outside of that SVC, I'm going to call that SVC, is the meaning of that word, the relational meaning of that word. The relational meaning is going to be considered a non-verb relation content category. Another term for that is a coordinated content category. Coordinated. Here's an example. Now here's a challenging sentence. The black cat chased the big dog. Notice you can identify two content categories in this sentence, really more, but mainly two main ones, right? Yes, there's the one that's picked up by the verb chased, and verbs typically help us understand what the verb relation content category is. Chased is an action, isn't it? And we have the cat chased the dog. So we have action content category, but also we have black and big. Those two lexical items. And what semantic relation is, or content category is embodied in those two words? Expressed by those two words, yes. Attribution, right? Black cat, big dog. Well, which do we go with? When we analyze the sentence, what content category do we say that sentence reflects? Well, we have a verb relation content category and a non-verb relation content category that can be identified, and that's how we make the decision. We're going to see that we're going to have a special on the form that we use. On the form that we use to analyze the semantics of these sentences, the content categories, on the very top of the form there will be a main content category that will be the verb relation content category that we will put the name of that category up there, in this case action, and all the action sentences are going to be listed on that page. We'll see that subsequent to this lecture. So in this case, the cat is the subject, the head of the noun phrase subject. The full subject is the black cat, isn't it? But the head of that phrase, the head, is cat. The verb phrase predicate is chase the big dog, but the head of that is chase. That's the head verb. And the complement of that sentence is, the full complement is the big dog. That's a noun phrase complement. The head of that phrase is the noun dog, so we have SVC. If we only consider SVC, cat, chase, dog, we identify that as action. See? If we only consider that, if we cover up, if we hide, putting my fingers over the other words, or if I put a my son makes wallets and things. If I put a piece of his leather over the words, the only words you will be able to see are SVC, and that's all I'm allowing my mind to consider now. That will reveal the verb relation, the driving content category in the organization of that sentence. Now the words outside of the SVC relation are black, big, and the. And the two I want to focus on right this moment are black and big, and that's where we get attribution as a content category, but it's NVRCC, non-verb relation content category. Why non-verb relation? Because it's not in the SVC, the heads of the phrases, which are, interestingly enough, also, remember we just did case assignment? Well, these are the things, these SVC things, these nouns, they get their case, you know, they're assigned, they play very important roles in the sentence, don't they? Thus, they are themselves a semantic relation that the mind pays attention to in deriving or generating meaning. And developmentally, children first produce single words and then single verb sentences without the modifications black and cat. They don't bring that stuff in till a little later on, because that stuff is brought in to the relationship. The bottom line relationship is the relationship between the heads of these phrases. These are merged. These other parts of the sentence are merged with the head parts. See that? So that's attribution. That's the non-verb relation content category. And that distinction is important. So important, in fact, that I require the following. In the final project for this course, where you analyze, and when you analyze the content form interactions of sentences, you must in fact physically write with a pencil or with your little computer SVC over the in any single verb sentence. This only applies to single verb sentences. Only applies to single verb sentences. You have to write SVC over the subject verb complement, or I will not accept your final project. Why will I not accept it? Because you make mistakes. That's why. So SVC will help you. So you must make that analysis, analyze the SVC relationship as a verb relation content category. You'll put all sentences that reflect the particular categories that you identify on pages headed by the name of that category, like all action sentences will go on one page, when existence sentences will go on another page, all locative action sentences in a different page, etc. We'll practice that in class, don't worry. And you will indicate on the page in another place the non-verb relations that are contained. By the way, the, T-H-E, and the, T-H-E, those are two other words, and they get specification. They are the non-verb relation specification. So I ask you to what you practice, and you can figure out what are the heads of, well, the noun phrase subject of the big fat cat ate the little mouse. What is the head of? What is the full noun phrase subject? Everybody. Now, if we were on play pause it, you'd fill this in without my talking, but here I'm going to talk, but I'll allow you to fill this in for yourselves. What's the head of that subject, of that sentence? Now, the verb phrase predicate, what is it? What's the head of the verb phrase predicate? Now, what's the object or the complement of that verb phrase predicate? And what's its head? Having made that analysis, you can go to the next step and answer the questions. What is the verb relation content category of the big fat cat ate the little mouse? What is the what are the non-verb relation content category or categories? So in sum, we'll discuss that when we meet. Language acquisition in children involves the acquisition of multiple semantic relations, by the way. Semantics and intentionality drive lexical and syntactic development. But creating sentences involving merging meaning verb relations and non-verb relation semantic relations, merging verb relation and non-verb relation semantic relations, literally, by virtue of the head and the non-heads. And creating and comprehending sentences involves making computations related to the heads of these phrases based on syntactic function. And we will be spending time on all of this as we go along. Thank you for joining me for this lecture, and we'll see you next time.